What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. So, further to my video earlier, it seems Boris Johnson might call a general election as early as this evening, which, if reports are to be believed, the Labour Party will actually back, and one of their MPs was even quoted as saying so on BBC Radio 4's Today programme earlier. So we will check that out after we read through this quick article from The Telegraph. It headlines, Boris Johnson set to push for Christmas election as Tory chairman warns, I don't want to be the Grinch. Boris Johnson looks set to push for an election before Christmas as the Conservative Party chairman insisted this morning does not want to be the Grinch. The Prime Minister has signalled he will try to go back to the country if EU leaders decide to grant another lengthy Brexit delay and is expected to call a vote as early as this evening. Whilst Cabinet Ministers were reportedly split on a snap poll on Wednesday morning, last night Downing Street insisted the government was united behind the need to break the impasse in Parliament. That's just a scare story from the mainstream media. I doubt the Cabinet split on an election. They all know that it's going to serve them fairly well. 15 points ahead in the polls is no small number. However, Mr Johnson's chances of forcing an election were cast into doubt on Wednesday evening after it emerged that scores of Labour MPs had threatened to vote down a motion if one is tabled. Oh, I wonder why. Under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, Mr Johnson needs a two-thirds majority in the Commons to secure a poll. Asked about the possibility of a December election this morning, Tory Chairman James Cleverly told BBC 4's Today programme, BBC Radio 4's Today programme, I don't want to be the Grinch, but the point is democracy is incredibly important and we have been prevented on discharging the duties imposed upon us. Which is correct, they have. The government, as I've said many times, can't do nothing. They are limited by what the Ramona Parliament wants to do. His comments were echoed by Justice Secretary Robert Buckland, who told the BBC that holding an election before the new year is the only way to break the deadlock. He should say it's the only way to drain the swamp. Mr Cleverly also accused Jeremy Corbyn of running scared of an election, claiming that Labour MPs did not want to face the electorate with a Brexit policy that is confused at best. It comes after Mr Corbyn was yesterday urged by his allies to delay a poll until next spring, amid growing resistance from backbenchers. The growing rebellion has sounded alarm bells on Labour's front bench, with Rebecca Long-Bailey, the Shadow Business Secretary, admitting that a number of MPs are worried about what will happen in an election. Oh, I wonder why Labour MPs might be worried what's going to happen in an election. As a matter of fact, I don't wonder. I know full well they're all terrified that they're going to lose their seats because they lied to the electorate. 2017 they said they would deliver the referendum result and they now want to go for a second referendum and back Remain. They know it's game over. These MPs in these Leave seats know they are in real trouble. They might as well just stand down now and let someone else lose in epic style next time. However, when asked repeatedly to clarify Labour's position this morning, she eventually told the Today programme that Labour would back an election request if a 3-month extension was granted. If he does go straight to calling for a general election, then of course we will support a general election. That's our position, she added. So there we have it. Rebecca Long-Bailey said this morning that Labour will back a general election, and let's hear her say it for herself.
I'm joined by Rebecca Long-Bailey, who is the Shadow Business Secretary. Good morning.
Good morning.
Behind us. So let's talk about how we could get there. It's very possible the Prime Minister is going to ask again for a general election the end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week. When he does, what will Labour's answer be?
Well, we don't know whether he will or not. Firstly, we need to wait for the EU to come back and formally confirm that they're going to give an extension, or a flex-tension, I think people are calling it at the moment, which means that we'll have the extension until the 31st of January. But of course, if the Prime Minister decided to put forward his bill to third reading and gave ample time for it to be scrutinised and that passed through Parliament, then we would obviously leave the European Union a lot earlier.
So as soon as the EU have given that extension, or flex extension as you call it, you'll be happy at that point to move immediately to a general election?
Well, what we've said is that we're ready for a general election. Of course, we want the opportunity to get rid of the Conservative government after the damage that they've done to our communities. And
so you will vote for that general election as soon as you've got that extension from the EU?
I think there's also another element to this, and in the last 48 hours after the government's bill went through second reading of the House, and after the programme motion was defeated, which the Prime Minister wanted to use to push the bill through in a mere 2 days without proper scrutiny, Jeremy Corbyn went to Boris Johnson and offered a realistic and pragmatic way forward. He said, if you come back with a reasonable time frame for us to be able to scrutinise this bill in Parliament, we will work with you if you really want to deliver this bill.
That's true, and it looks like the Prime Minister's response to that offer is to say he's going to call a general election. So just yes or no.
Well, that's
once you've got an extension from the EU, which we expect to happen by the end of this week, Labour will be in favour of and vote in favour of another general election.
Well, that's, it's within the Prime Minister's prerogative, really. But if he does go straight
Well, it's up to the Labour Party whether or not they vote for it. So can you just tell us yes or no whether or not you will?
If he goes straight to calling for a general election, of course we'll support a general election. But I would be quite sad.
Before Christmas?
No, I'd be quite sad, honestly, if having been offered a compromise, a pragmatic compromise, that it would be viewed quite unreasonable for the Prime Minister to not put his bill through Parliament if really he wants to reach consensus and he wants to have it properly scrutinised. But the reason that
you're telling us straightforwardly, this is important, that as soon as the Prime Minister asks for a general election, once the EU has given the UK an extension, the Labour Party will vote for it.
That's our position, but we also want the Prime Minister to look at the compromise that's been offered that a lot of MPs support, and that's the ability to be able to properly scrutinise the bill. And the fear is, and this is shared by a number of colleagues, both Conservative MPs and Labour MPs, is that Boris Johnson isn't interested in having a consensus on this bill.
We'll need to leave it there. Rebecca Long-Bailey, thank you very much for talking to us.
Well, guys, you heard it for yourself. The Labour Party will back a general election if they get a 3-month extension, which is looking almost certain right now. This also follows after Joe Swinson has attempted to get Jeremy Corbyn to back a second referendum amendment. It says here, Joe Swinson urged Jeremy Corbyn to back the Liberal Democrats' amendment to the Queen's Speech. Obviously, they couldn't attach it to the bill, so the Queen's Speech is the next best thing for them, which would commit the government to bringing about a second referendum. No, it wouldn't, because the government could refuse to pay for it on the same principle as before. Swinson is just clutching at straws to get some press, I think. Or she is that stupid. One of the two. Under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, the Prime Minister could table a motion in the Commons to hold an election early. If approved, an election could be held within 25 working days, meaning voters could be heading to the polling stations in late November or early December. However, a major snag is that under the FTA, Mr Johnson needs 2/3 of MPs to back the motion, as I've said multiple times in videos and in my live streams. Whilst it would normally be unthinkable for opposition MPs to block an election, scores of Labour MPs have signalled their opposition to an early poll due to their concern over the party's recent polling numbers and their desire to try and force a second referendum beforehand. Realistically, they're terrified that the Labour voters are going to come down on these MPs extremely hard for their flip-flopping over Brexit, considering they was all elected on a manifesto that said they would deliver it, and now they're all begging for a second referendum and to remain. The Labour Party is going to get cleaned out for MPs, unless of course we get the postal votes. If significant numbers rebel, Mr Johnson may struggle to reach the threshold required, which then brings about the possibility of a confidence vote, which we know, if he gets a confidence vote, they got 2 weeks to try and form another government with the Remoaners in Parliament. If that fails, then it goes to an election. And then we also have the single line bill, which I was talking about earlier in a video. Another alternative would be for the government to bring forward a one-line bill, which would temporarily override the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. This would only require a simple majority and would fix the date of a poll in stone, making it harder for Labour to oppose. However, opposition MPs could try to amend it, force through votes for 16-year-olds. Whilst problematic for the Conservatives, it is highly unlikely that these changes could be implemented before an election and would likely come into effect at the end of the next Parliament. Unlikely doesn't mean they won't. Unlikely means that currently as it stands they wouldn't be able to, but the Remoaner Parliament could pass all kinds of legislation that changes that very quickly. We've seen with the Ben Bill and the Letwin Amendment just what they're willing to do. So we will have to wait and see. But I'm going to end the video there anyway, guys, so be ready for an election to be called this evening, maybe tomorrow, but it's likely to be called this week, I would think, and so does the media seem to think the same thing. So get ready for that. Labour said they will support it. Now, before I go, I want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribestar members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
Owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.
Parliament is a dead Parliament. It should no longer sit. It has no moral right to sit on these green benches. They don't like the truth. Twice they have been asked to let the electorate decide upon whether they should continue to sit in their seats, while they block 17.4 million people's votes. This Parliament is a disgrace, but they're too cowardly to give it a go. But the time is coming. The time is coming, Mr. Speaker, when even these turkeys won't be able to prevent Christmas.